It started out like any other Wednesday. I was driving to the office, running through my mental checklist for the day, when I caught a glimpse of a familiar face on the sidewalk. I slammed on the brakes, realizing immediately it was an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. They looked right at me for a beat, a flicker of something in their eyes, and then, without hesitation, they turned and walked away with a deliberate, almost military stride. I pulled over, watching their retreating figure, and I knew, deep down, that something big was about to drop. I parked the car and walked into the high-rise. My office floor was a picture of normal colleagues chattering, the buzz of keyboards, but my focus was shot. Was that encounter this morning a random chance, or did it mean something more? Before I could even settle the question, my phone vibrated. A text message, no sender name, just a stark, chilling line. "We need to talk, today." I opened it. That was it. Short, non-committal, and enough to send a jolt of anxiety through me, telling me this wasn't going to be simple. I sat at my desk, trying to blend into the office normalcy. The world outside the window was business as usual, but ever since seeing that face and getting that text, I knew this day was going to be an inflection point. Every small action, every decision ahead, felt loaded with unknown consequences. I logged onto my computer, checking emails and documents, but my eyes kept darting back to the phone, waiting for the next signal. I had no idea who the sender was, but this clearly wasn't a casual catch-up. I could feel the first domino tipping, the start of a sequence of events. Just as I was about to join a morning meeting, the phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered, and all I heard was a heavy sigh on the other end, followed by a low-voiced command. "We have to meet now. This can't wait." I told them I'd be there, my mind racing to calculate every risk. I ditched the meeting, quickly grabbed my files, and walked out. On the drive, I called a few contacts, old network guys, a couple of people from the past, but nobody knew anything. It felt like I was the only one in the loop, and that isolation was the first clear sign. I was walking into a situation way over my head. When I reached the designated spot, a quiet, almost abandoned commercial area, I stopped the car and scanned the perimeter. The air was empty, not scary. I stepped out, and there they were, the sender of the text, standing and looking straight at me. There was no greeting, just the hard lock of eyes and a silence that stretched for seconds. I knew right then, from this precise moment, everything was going to be different from the life I thought I had. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the concrete reality of the moment. The person spoke one sentence, cutting through the silence. "There are things you need to know, and you can't run from them." I didn't interrupt, just absorbed the words. Every choice, every action I made from this second on, would directly impact whatever was coming next. That day, what started as an ordinary morning commute spiraled into a rapid succession of events, each step pulling me deeper into a situation without a clear way out. I couldn't predict the outcome or foresee the consequences. All I knew was that from the moment I saw that familiar face on the street and received that cryptic text, my normal life was gone. I stood facing the contact in that cramped, windowless room where we'd agreed to meet. No time for pleasantries, for catching up on old times. They got straight to the point, their voice low and urgent. "There's something about your family, something you need to know now." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my brow furrowing, the anxiety from the morning tightening its grip. They didn't answer directly. They simply shook their head and slid a thick manila folder across the worn table. I flipped it open, page after page of documents I'd never seen, records of debt, transactions I hadn't authorized, and financial decisions that smelled distinctly of fraud. My blood ran cold. I looked up, my voice flat with disbelief. "Where did you get this? How is this even real?" They just leaned back, their gaze unnervingly steady. "You have to verify it yourself. No one can fix this but you." I immediately hit the bank on my cell, checked the accounts, cross-referenced the records. Everything in the folder was agonizingly accurate. I didn't get it, but the reality was stark. I was being pulled into a situation where the puppeteer was completely invisible. It hit me like a physical blow. If I stalled, the consequences would hit my family directly, as I struggled to organize the papers. The contact delivered another chilling warning. "You're going to have to confront some people, and not all of them are on your side. If you hesitate, it'll be too late." I nodded, the reality sinking in that I had zero other options. I had to move now, regardless of who was behind this or what their true motive was. I left the rendezvous point, and drove to the locations listed in the files. Meeting the individuals who seemed to be directly involved, They were cagey, delivering frustratingly vague answers, but they gave me enough to confirm this was not a simple misunderstanding. A complicated network of problems was unraveling, and I was the one left holding the loose ends. During all this, the strange texts kept coming, each message short, clipped, and unnerving. "We are watching you. Don't tell anyone. It's more complicated than you think." I realized I wasn't just dealing with a financial mess or rogue paperwork. There were powerful, unseen forces tracking my every move. I finally pulled into my driveway, determined to assemble the mountain of data and prepare for the next phase. Everything was happening fast, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knew that from this point forward, every decision mattered, every action could change the outcome. I sat down at the kitchen table, spread the files out, made lists of people to meet, and charged my phone, prepping my notes, getting everything ready for tomorrow. The day was over, but I knew the real sequence of events had just begun. From an average morning, I had stepped into a vortex of secrecy and silent threats. I was no longer just me. I was a husband and a father, and I had to fix this, not just for myself, but for the safety of my family. The next day, I started checking off names on my meticulously compiled list. The first stop was an old manager at my former company, someone with direct knowledge of the paperwork I'd been handed. I hit them with specific, pointed questions, but their answers were evasive, clipped, and full of corporate jargon designed to obfuscate. Still, it was enough for me to realize this wasn't just a handful of mistaken documents. There was a complex structure, a web I still couldn't see the edges of. Next, I tracked down a financial intermediary linked to the dubious transactions. This person was smooth, assuring me everything was by the book and standard operating procedure. But their shifty eyes and forced composure screamed the opposite. I started taking notes on everything, every pause, every change in tone, looking for the tell that would expose the anomaly. Each meeting brought me a new piece of the puzzle, but simultaneously raised the stakes. While driving between locations, my phone buzzed again. Another text from an untraceable number. "You're close, but be careful. Some people will try to stop you." I glanced around the streets, the sense of paranoia growing. No one knew I was doing this but me. The text confirmed what I already suspected. Every action was being monitored, and the people involved were willing to do whatever it took to keep their secret buried. As I wrapped up a particularly tense meeting, I stumbled upon a critical piece of information. Transactions had been executed without my knowledge or signature, directly affecting my family's assets and legal rights. This pushed me past the point of casual investigation. I had to go deeper to find out who the architect was and what their real endgame looked like. Ignoring this would not just hurt me, it would expose my wife and children to a direct, tangible threat. I returned home late that night with a fresh list of problems to tackle tomorrow. I reviewed the files again, replaying the calls, scrolling through the cryptic messages. One truth stood out. This situation was far beyond what normal channels could handle. I had to move fast, but I had to be precise. One small mistake could trigger devastating repercussions. Later that evening, in the quiet solitude of the house, I laid out all the collected evidence. Seemingly disparate connections were beginning to form a complicated picture. I knew that from here on out, every step was loaded, and the decisions I made next would largely determine the outcome. The day was over, but the countdown had just begun. The next morning, the appointments on my list felt less like meetings and more like interrogations. The tension was palpable. The first person I met with was deliberately uncooperative, refusing to give straight answers, instead offering corporate doublespeak and ambiguity. I had to press relentlessly, trying to verify every detail. Each sliver of a lead led to 3 new questions, but slowly, painfully, the overall picture was starting to take shape. Next, I went to see someone directly involved in the suspicious financial activity. They tried stalling, distracting me with irrelevant details and feigned confusion. I realized this wasn't mere clerical error. Someone was actively trying to bury the truth. I took meticulous notes, discreetly snapping photos of documents and recording the conversation when I felt it was necessary and safe. Mid-investigation, my phone started vibrating non-stop. The strange texts intensified, turning into explicit warnings. "Don't go any further. Some people don't want you to find out the truth." I understood clearly now that I was crossing into dangerous territory. These meetings weren't just about collecting data anymore. They were tests of reaction, checks on my resolve. Around noon, I got a call from another unknown number. The voice was calm, almost unnervingly level, but undeniably powerful. "You should stop, or you will run into serious trouble." I didn't flinch. "I have to find the truth," I shot back. The line went dead, but the warning echoed in my mind. Every move from this point forward had to be calculated. Ultra-cautious. That afternoon, I met with a more significant figure, someone who held a large piece of the puzzle regarding the abnormal transactions and files. This time, they were more forthcoming, providing details I hadn't known existed. The connections began to solidify. This wasn't just a financial discrepancy. It tied directly into legal maneuvers that could genuinely jeopardize my family's stability and well-being back home. I compiled everything, resorting the files, structuring the timeline, and listing the next critical steps. The situation was clearer now, but simultaneously far more complex and dangerous. I recognized that since that chance encounter with my old friend and the first text message, I had been sucked into a vortex. I couldn't escape without facing the ugly reality head-on. That evening, I prepared for the coming day, planning to meet with a few key high-level individuals, organizing my evidence and my notes. I knew every action I took now could have massive ripple effects. If I messed up, the consequences wouldn't just be mine to bear. They would belong to my family. The day was done, but the sequence of events was accelerating, the tension ratcheting up, and the next steps would determine everything. The following morning, I received a text that made my blood run cold. "Get here now if you want to save what's left." No name, no signature. I knew instantly this message concerned my family, and there was no more time for caution. I grabbed my files, my phone, and the key intelligence I had gathered, and bolted out the door. At the designated location, I found another familiar face waiting, not the old friend from part 1, but a different acquaintance from my past, equally compromised. They quickly handed me a new stack of documents, loans, transactions, and property decisions related to our family assets that I had never authorized. All of them bore the unmistakable markings of manipulation. I immediately tried to call the related parties for confirmation, but most refused to cooperate or gave me painfully vague runarounds. While I was frantically trying to organize the new information, a figure emerged, clearly aware of my entire operation. They were menacingly polite, stressing that if I continued digging, there would be serious, immediate repercussions. I looked them straight in the eye and stated firmly that I was going to find the truth and protect my family no matter what. The confrontation was a stalemate, but it was clear that from now on, my decisions had to be swift and flawless. Afterward, I rushed to meet with an attorney to review the new files and assess my legal standing. The evidence I presented confirmed my fears. Someone was systematically hijacking our finances, and without drastic intervention, my family would suffer immediate, profound damage. I knew I had to take aggressive legal action, but I had to maintain absolute secrecy. That afternoon, I returned home, compiling all the data and finalizing my next moves. I called my wife, telling her I had to handle an urgent, critical situation and needed her to stay completely quiet about it. I stressed that if this was leaked prematurely, it would endanger her and the kids. I knew the burden of the secret was unfair, but their safety depended on her silence. That evening, I sat hunched over the documents, checking every detail, planning tomorrow's meetings, and preparing for every possible contingency. I finally acknowledged the brutal reality. Since the day I saw my old friend receive that cryptic text and began my investigation, I had been pulled into a high-stakes, life-altering game. From this moment on, my actions would directly determine my family's fate. The day ended, but the tension had hit a fever pitch. I knew the next step was the most critical decision yet, and failure was not an option. The chain of events was leading me toward situations where even the smallest misstep could cause catastrophic consequences. The next morning, everything felt different, tighter. I received an urgent call from an untraceable number. "Be careful. Your family is being watched." No name, no details, just a chilling confirmation that the situation was spiraling beyond my control. I immediately reviewed my notes and files, ensuring all the gathered intelligence was securely backed up and hidden. I had to meet with a highly influential person in the network of abnormal transactions and records. They wouldn't admit to a thing, maintaining a perfect facade of corporate ignorance. But through their strained body language and subtle hesitations, I knew my family was now facing a direct, immediate threat. I furiously took mental notes, making sure to physically secure and duplicate any documents I could. Meanwhile, my phone kept vibrating with anonymous warnings. "They are closing in. Keep your mouth shut." I realized the danger was no longer confined to paperwork or legal loopholes. It had become a physical risk to my wife and kids. I was forced to make a snap decision: push the investigation forward, or prioritize their immediate safety. I decided to directly confront a few more lower-level individuals involved. Cross-verifying the information I had, They were still attempting to mislead and obscure the truth, but armed with the solid evidence I'd collected, I was finally able to piece the puzzle together. The people behind the scheme were no longer entirely hidden, and I knew I was standing directly in the center of their operation. Returning home that evening, I checked every detail regarding our assets, rights, and the suspicious transactions. It became crystal clear my family was the target. I formulated a precise two-pronged plan, tackled the manipulators head-on while simultaneously safeguarding my wife and children. Every action had to be executed with absolute precision. Error was not an option. I called my wife, keeping my voice level and calm. "Everything will be fine," I told her, "but I need you to stay home tonight and keep the doors locked. Absolutely no visitors." I didn't elaborate, afraid of causing panic and compromising our safety. I knew that from this moment on, every decision carried the full weight of their protection, and tomorrow would be the turning point to resolve this entire mess. The day ended, but the tension had reached its highest point. Every threat was now directly linked to my family's well-being, and the next step would be decisive. I couldn't afford a single mistake, and every move from here on out carried a massive responsibility. The next day was the final act. I gathered everything, all the damning evidence, the meticulous files, and the list of connections I'd compiled. My goal was simple: confirm the truth one last time, and, most importantly, shield my family from any lingering danger. I went straight to the assumed head of the entire shady network. I laid out the conclusive evidence. Initially, they tried to stonewall me, but when they saw the sheer volume of information I possessed and realized I couldn't be deterred, they were forced to concede. The fraudulent transactions, the abnormal financial decisions, it all linked directly back to them. I recorded the entire admission and drafted a detailed report immediately, ensuring I had everything needed for legal action if necessary. Throughout the confrontation, I maintained constant contact with my wife, ensuring she and the children remained safe. I instructed her to stay home, not venture outside, and to avoid any contact with people remotely related to this mess. My family was the absolute priority, and I knew every choice made today directly impacted their future. After several tense hours of dialogue and negotiation, I managed to dismantle the immediate threat. The perpetrators were forced to halt their illegal activities, and the compromised records were corrected and clarified. I double-checked every piece of information, confirming there were no loopholes left open. The entire ordeal was finally brought to order, and my family's security was no longer compromised. I returned home, put all the sensitive files into a secure vault, and sat down with my wife. "It's over," I told her simply. "We're safe now." She nodded, not asking for all the gruesome details, just knowing that something serious had passed and was now resolved. I knew from that moment forward, I would be far more vigilant in every decision concerning my family and our assets. The day concluded, and the intense sequence of events was officially over. The threats had been neutralized, the mysteries exposed, and either husband and father had successfully protected my family from direct danger. I knew that my timely decisions and decisive actions had helped us survive this test, and from now on, the security of my family would always be my absolute, unwavering priority.